So let's talk House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon season 2 was interesting, to say the least. Could have been executed a lot better, but that's a whole different story for a whole different video. However, despite how atrocious season 2 was, it did actually spark my motivation to reread Fire and Blood. This chonky boy. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this again, and to be fair, I know I slate it, but I did enjoy watching House of the Dragon. But one thing that I picked up on is that there's actually a lot of differences between the TV show and this big boy book. If I were to sit here and film a video about every single difference between the TV show and the book, we would be here all day and you would quite frankly get very bored. I'd get bored of myself. So instead, I've compiled a list of the changes that I think are the best and the changes that I think are the worst. This video is purely based on opinion, so if you don't agree, that is absolutely fine. The only facts in here are the changes. Whether or not I've listed them as best or worst, that's not fact. So let's crack on with it. Just as an FYI, I did review House of the Dragon season 2, so if you do want to see that, I will leave a link to the finale episode on the screen and in the description box. And as always, I would love to hear your opinions, so please make sure to leave a comment. And if there's any changes between the TV show and the book that I don't mention in this video, I'd love for you to post that in a comment as well if you've got some opinions on it. So I've picked up on 10 changes. 5 good, 5 bad, in my opinion. Let's save the worst to last. And when I talk about the changes, it's quite hard to say what's actually true and factual in Fire and Blood because this whole book is based on testimonies. Basically, this is a whole book of rumours. So whether or not any of the things in here are actually true and actually happened, who knows? I'm also going to be uploading a review on Fire and Blood to my channel because I really enjoyed rereading this, which is crazy because it's basically an entire Wikipedia article in 700 pages. So let's talk about the best changes, the things that I think the TV show did a lot better than the books and were a positive change. My first best change, the characters are aged up. For example, when we meet Rhaenrya and Alicent in House of the Dragon, they are both aged 14. However, in Fire and Blood, Rhaenyra is actually 8. Now, I heard that they had to age the characters up because of UK filming law. Because part of House of the Dragon was filmed in England, so even if the actor is older than 16, if they are playing a character who's under 16, they are not allowed to be portrayed having sex, regardless of the age of the actor. Which we know that Rhaenyra does get down and dirty in House of the Dragon, so they will have had to have aged her up to make sure that she was definitely over 16 by the time that she did all of that. Meaning they had to start her off in season 1 as being 14, so that the timeline would make sense. I believe that is also why Daenerys Targaryen is aged up from 13 to 16 in Game of Thrones. Because we all know that in A Song of Ice and Fire, Daenerys is a lot younger when she gets down on Khal Drogo. So it made sense for Game of Thrones to age her up as well in conjunction with that, and it's a similar thing for Rhaenyra. Now, interestingly as well, Viserys in Fire and Blood is actually 29 when he marries Alicent. However, in House of the Dragon, they've significantly aged up his character because he is played by 48-year-old Paddy. And I'm sorry, Paddy, but you don't look 29. You look good for your age, I think, but you don't look 29 when you're knocking on 50. Number 2, my next best change. In Fire and Blood, Queen Aemma died in childbirth, which is very similar to House of the Dragon. However, in the TV show, Viserys has to make a decision between whether or not to save Aemma or his unborn child, and thus he ends up losing them both. Now that storyline is actually taken from a different ruler in Fire and Blood, so that is actually what King Ennis had to do. So he had to make that choice for Alyssa Velaryon, whether or not to save his unborn child or her. Now they took that storyline and gave it to Viserys and Aemma, when actually in Fire and Blood that wasn't how Aemma died specifically. I like that they made that change and that they gave Viserys that storyline because it makes it more emotive, and that's right back at the start of season 1, and it really started the series off with being deep. I was a bit shell-shocked after that episode, and I'm really glad that they did include that, even though it was a very difficult watch. It's very hard-hitting, but it was highly, highly emotive, and I feel like it just would have felt a little bit different if Viserys didn't have to make that choice, which in Fire and Blood he doesn't. I am so sorry if you can hear the storm in the background. I'm finding it quite cozy. That might just be me though. My third best change. I love the fact that in the TV show, they made Rhaenyra and Alicent best friends. In the book, they're not even friends. It's literally like Alicent is evil stepmother. And I think as well in the book, Alicent is 10 years Rhaenyra's elder. But in the TV show, there is not an age difference at all between them, and they've grown up together. They've basically been best friends their entire lives, which means that it hurts so much when they then become enemies. And this entire war and everything that happens in the Dance of the Dragons, it separates them even further. And again, I just think that that is so highly emotive, more so than in the book. I really love the fact that my emotions were completely ripped out of me and shredded at the seams because they were two best friends who just got torn apart. It made it harder to watch, and that's great, whereas it's not the same in Fire and Blood. Numero 4, I absolutely love that they actually changed the way that Laenor Velaryon died in the TV show. In Fire and Blood, Laenor Velaryon is stabbed to death by his lover. He hardcore dies. In House of the Dragon, his death is faked and he escapes with his lover, and that is just such a wholesome ending for him. That is the preferred outcome for me. I love that his death is faked. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Fire and Blood is based on testimonies. So that could actually be the case, that his death was faked and the testimonies say that he was stabbed to death, but actually he escaped with his lover. And I just liked it, and I just thought, you know, in a world of cruelty, there was a little tiny thread of goodness. So I really enjoyed that change. For me, that was a better outcome for him. And then my number 5, best change between the TV show and the books. In the books, Alicent is not with Viserys when he's about to die. So therefore, she does not hear him talk about Aegon the Conqueror's prophecy, and therefore mishears him and misunderstands him. In the TV show, I think that that worked so much better, and it really brought that storyline to life. I much prefer the fact that the whole reason why the war started was because she listened to him and misinterpreted the wrong Aegon that he was talking about. That's not in the books at all. In the books, he names Rhaenyra as his heir, he dies, and then they're all basically like, well, he's not here to argue against it now, so let's crown Aegon. Whereas I feel like because the TV show changed it so that there's actually more of a motive behind it, because Alicent misheard the wrong name, and then that revelation in season 2 where she realises that, damn, she messed up. That's so much better. Like, I really like that change, and I think that that makes so much more sense, and it also brings in some of the lore behind it. Like, we've got reference to Aegon the Conqueror here, and I think that that gives more motive behind it. The fact that she thinks he's naming a different heir makes it more of a powerful storyline. So those are my top 5 best changes. Those are the things that were different about House of the Dragon TV show and Fire and Blood book that I actually really enjoyed and thought were changed for the better. But what changes did I think were the worst and that I wish they didn't do? Number 1, worst change. I don't like that they changed the way that Daemon's wives died. I just don't see the point. In the TV show, Daemon kills his wife, Rhea. In the books, she accidentally falls off a horse. Either way, she dies. I don't think that they needed to make it so that Daemon was the one to kill her. It didn't add anything. It just seemed a bit like, but why? So in the TV show, it's pretty obvious that Daemon was the one who made sure she fell off her horse and got crushed beneath it. He goes to her with the intention to kill her, and he does end up doing so. That is not in Fire and Blood. In Fire and Blood, Daemon does not kill her. It's just reported that she accidentally fell off a horse. Now, again, as we've said, this book is based on testimonies, so it could be the truth that Daemon did kill his wife and then it just was reported as an accident. However, I don't really like that change. I just don't think it's important enough. I don't feel like there was enough of a motive behind it. I feel like you could have just taken that part out of the TV show and it wouldn't really have mattered. She could have just fallen off a horse accidentally. Similarly, in the TV show, Daemon's other wife, Laenor Velaryon, is burnt by her dragon of her choosing. So she dies a full-on dragon rider's death. She has chosen to be burnt by her dragon. following a unfortunate childbirth loss. In the book, she has the difficult childbirth experience. However, she wants to ride her dragon one last time, and so she is crawling. She's so weak. She's literally crawling to her dragon, and she collapses on the tower steps and dies and never makes it to her dragon. So in the TV show, they gave her a lot more of an honourable death, added a bit more strength to her character. She chose when she was going to die. She took that control. Now, in a way, I do see why this would be a good change. However, again, if they kept it true to the books, it would have been more of an emotive factor. Because I already think that Rhaenys was able to die in season 2 in a very honourable way. That is that strong female character who was able to die a dragon rider's death as she chooses. Because she could flee from the battle at Rook's Rest, but she doesn't. She comes back, she fights 2 dragons, and she fights for her cause, and she therefore dies with her dragon. That is the depiction of an honourable dragon rider's death. I don't necessarily feel like Laenor Velaryon needed that. I feel like they could have kept it true to the books, where she had the desire to ride her dragon one last time, but was unable to do so because she was so weak. That would have hit me in the feels a lot more. So that's one of my worst changes. I don't really like the way that they changed Daemon's wives' deaths. That's really hard to say. Number 2 of my worst changes. 3 words. Blood and cheese. I don't like the way that they didn't make that brutal enough. In the book for Fire and Blood, Alicent is gagged up at the time. In the TV show, she's screwing Chris Cole. I just feel like she doesn't need to be doing that. I feel like it would have been better if she was gagged up a little bit, you know? And not by Chris Cole. In the book, Helena has 3 children. Jaehaerys, Jaehaera, and Mela. Blood and Cheese tell her it's a son for a son, so Helena has to choose between Jaehaerys or Mela. Because Jaehaerys is the heir and he is the elder of the 2 boys, she picks her youngest, which is Mela, and chooses him to die. So, Blood and Cheese say to the little toddler, "You hear that? Your mum wants you to die," and kill Jaehaerys instead. So they kill the opposite son to who she chose. When I read that in the book, that is brutal. Was that in the TV show? No, not at all. In fact, Mela doesn't even exist. Helena does not have to pick between which son, and there's no brutal dialogue. I just feel like it would have had more of an emotional impact if they'd kept that dialogue in, because that's so hard-hitting. It's so difficult to read, but it wasn't quite the same. They did have some dialogue in there. I think the dialogue in the TV show is more of the fact that Jaehaera and Jaehaerys look so similar because they're identical twins. So they're asking Helena to pick whichever one is the son. So she chooses one and they have to work out whether or not she's being truthful by saying that that is the son. So I think they did try to make it as emotive as they could, but I just felt like it would have been easier and more powerful if they'd have done it the original way as documented in the book. But they couldn't have, because Mela doesn't exist. There is no other son for her to choose between. So my 3rd worst change between the TV show and the book. Tyland Lannister and Sharako Lohar fighting in the mud pits when he's trying to get their alliance. That was like right at the end of season 2, I believe. That was really recent. So that storyline was actually taken from some different characters in Fire and Blood. So it was actually the storyline of Laenor Velaryon, which is one of Corlys's illegitimate sons. And he is wrestling in a mud pit with Rhaenrya Alicent, following the whole Dance of the Dragons storyline. So the war has actually pretty much ended at this point. In fact, at this point where they're wrestling in the mud pit, that might not even be in House of the Dragon at all in terms of that timeline, because it is set afterwards. However, the production did take that storyline from those 2 characters in the book and gave it to Tyland Lannister and Sharako Lohar instead. Sharako Lohar is also biologically a man in the books, but they hired a female actress to play the character in the TV show. That's not a bad change. I'm not saying that that is the worst change. I think that's fine. The person who plays that character is brilliant at the job. And that scene was really, really comical. It was quite funny. However, and this is why I think it's one of the worst changes, it wasn't necessary. And it didn't make me laugh enough to warrant it being in one of the final episodes of season 2. I felt like it dragged on for too long. I felt like it was a little bit fillery. I think it was there to add more of a comical feel into the storyline, but that close to the season finale, However, if they build on that in season 3, so perhaps they're maybe going to give more of a role to Tyland Lannister or to Sharako Lohar, if they're going to justify that more in season 3, then I will eat my own words. I'll come back to this video and I will personally leave a hate comment to myself to tell me I'm wrong. But right now, as it stands, season 3 has not come out yet, and these characters' storylines have not progressed any further, and I just did not feel like it was necessary. My 4th worst change between the books and the TV show. In the book, there is a character named Nettles who claims Sheepstealer. In the TV show, Nettles does not exist, and they have given that storyline to Rhaenrya. Now, I personally really enjoyed reading about Nettles. She seems like such a funny, quirky character, but she doesn't even exist. Now, I can see why they would merge the Nettles and Rhaenrya storylines together, but I mentioned this in my reviews episode by episode in season 2, that I just felt like they haven't done Rhaenyra's storyline justice. They've paced it far too slowly. She's really boring. She seems like she has no personality. They need to give more depth to her character. Whereas in the book, like, Nettles seems really fun, and eventually later down the line, Rhaenyra seems like a good, more established character too in Fire and Blood. At the moment, she's just a bit meh. And I would be interested to see how this whole storyline of Rhaenyra claiming Sheepstealer pans out. And those storylines later down the line don't feel like they would link up very well. Huge spoiler alert for the character of Nettles. Please skip ahead about 30 seconds if you don't want to hear this. But in Fire and Blood, Nettles actually gets with Daemon, and then she just randomly escapes and nobody knows where she is for the rest of her life, and that is so funny to me. She just magically avoids the whole war. But obviously she doesn't exist in Fire and Blood. Are they going to make Rhaenys get with Daemon? Are they going to make Rhaenys magically escape? But we also know in Fire and Blood that Rhaenys' storyline does not allow her to escape, and she is very important further on in Fire and Blood, like after the whole dance is finished. So I'm just a bit unsure as to how they're gonna do that storyline, and I just think that they need to give Rhaenys a bit more personality, because I'm just a bit bored of her, and I don't think that they paced the storyline very well at all in season 2. And if you're gonna remove a really cool character like Nettles, then you gotta make the other characters less boring. And then my 5th and final worst change of House of the Dragon and Fire and Blood. There is no mushroom. Now, if you haven't read Fire and Blood, that's going to seem really weird out of context. So Mushroom is one of the testimonies who has contributed towards Fire and Blood, and he is actually a dwarf who served as the fool for many Targaryen rulers, and he saw the whole Dance of the Dragons play out. And he's just so funny. I do understand why he would not be in the TV production. The whole A Song of Ice and Fire universe already has a funny, witty dwarf that cannot be beaten. Do I even need to say his name? Tyrion. And he's obviously from the Game of Thrones TV production. If House of the Dragon put Mushroom the dwarf in the TV show, I feel like it's almost like the two dwarves are trying to compete for who's funniest. And I also don't think it's culturally appropriate to have a dwarf who is basically the laughingstock of the kingdom and who serves as the fool, who's just there to make everybody laugh at him. But I would have appreciated if they had taken elements from Mushroom's character and put it into a different character. So they could have still had a fool, not necessarily a dwarf, a clumsy, funny, maybe witty character, one like Mushroom who is always making inappropriate jokes at inappropriate times and just consistently gives that comical feel to the TV show throughout. Because like I mentioned earlier, I think they've tried to add a comedy aspect with the Tyland Lannister and Sharako Lohar scene, but it felt a bit odd because we haven't had comedy woven throughout House of the Dragon. It's not what it's there for. So it just felt a bit odd that they would add some sort of comical aspect to it that late on in the series. However, if they'd had a character like Mushroom right at the start, just a side character, not a main one, but just one who every so often added in some consistent comedic effect throughout the whole series, I would have greatly appreciated that. So I can see why Mushroom's not included, but I kind of wish they'd had a version of him. So those are 10 changes between House of the Dragon TV show and Fire and Blood the book, and ranked into the 5 best and the 5 worst. Remember, these are just my opinions. I would absolutely love to hear what your opinions are. Do you agree with any of the changes I've mentioned here? Do you disagree? And also, are there any other changes that I haven't mentioned that you think are good or bad? Because there's so many changes. Like when you look into it, even little things, there's so many changes between the book and the TV show. I would just love to hear from you. So make sure that you leave a comment below so that we can keep this conversation going. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up to let me know that you did. And if you like my content and you want to see more from me, then please subscribe because it's free and it means that you can see my videos easier. Thank you so much for watching this. I really appreciate it. I will see you next time, or rather you'll see me, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.